And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Translators On Air. My name is Dmitry I'm your host. Joining me today, my incredible co-host, Elena Tereshchenkova. Hi, Elena.
Hey, everyone. I've missed you.
And our guest today, Jeff Israely. Jeff is the co-founder and editor of Worldcrunch. He's a former Time magazine bureau chief in Rome and Paris, and he has also been a correspondent for Associated Press, Boston Globe, and Oakland Tribune. Hi, Jeff.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
So today we're going to be talking about the challenges of translating news and journalism. But before we jump to the topic of our conversation, I would like to make a few announcements, as always. This third season of Translators on Air has been sponsored by our friends at SmartCat. SmartCat offers a free CAT tool for translators, and they also have a platform where you can get translation jobs. So if it's something you're interested in, just click the green button below this video, or you can visit the first link in the description if you're watching this on YouTube or SoundCloud or iTunes. And of course, don't forget to share the link to this crowdcast on social media. The more people join us, the more fun we'll have. You can also use chat window on the right-hand side to leave comments and say hi. Or if you have a specific questions for Jeff, Elena, and me, you can press the orange button below this video that says ask a question or suggest a topic, and we'll be more than happy to discuss your questions. All right, everyone, we have quite a few people join us already. Hello, and Sophie. Hello, Pablo, Yelena, Susanna, Laura, Maria, Lola, Ian, Clara. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I hope you'll enjoy our today's conversation. We have a very interesting guest today. Okay, Jeff, over to you. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for finding the time to do this crowdcast with us. We are very excited.
Super.
So, Jeff, can you please tell us, I already introduced you, but can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background in journalism?
Sure. Well, yeah, I come from sort of what they now call the old media. I was a reporter at local newspapers in California, and then I ended up in Italy, in Rome, and was a correspondent there for the Associated Press, and did some freelancing, and then became the bureau chief for Time magazine in 2001 in Rome, and then moved up to Paris in 2009. And so, my past was really just being a reporter, going out and the old way that we used to do things, which was, looking for stories and talking to people and going to meet people or talking to them on the phone, maybe having an interview by email. But even what we're doing right now wasn't ever part of my work back then. But then eventually in the 2000s, started working for online and for the website for Time, and thinking a little bit more about the internet. And then in 2011, sort of pulled this old idea that I had for a while off the shelf, which became Worldcrunch. And it's an idea that's taken from weekly newspapers here in France and in Italy. Also, there's one in Portugal and Japan, which basically looks for interesting stories around the world in any language, usually in newspapers and magazines, but more and more now, off of websites as well. And so looking for stories, no matter what the language, to translate into the readership of the local public. And so this didn't exist in English in any form at the time, and so founded Worldcrunch as an online global media. And set up partnerships with some of the top newspapers, first starting here in Europe, but then expanding around the world. We've got more than 30 partners in China, in Russia, in Turkey, in Latin America, Germany, France, Italy, and all over. And we have partnerships with them where we're able to find stories that we think are interesting for a global reader, and translate them into English and edit them and share them and get them out there to our readers. And that's Worldcrunch. And so I'm now the editor as the co-founder. So it's part of my work is also trying to figure out how to make this small company, the small but global company work as a business. But most of my time is spent as an editor, looking for the right stories, responding to pitches, editing the stories that come in, the translations that come in. And so it's just in these last five or 6 years that I've really sort of gotten into your world of translation. But I don't have a translation background. I speak French and Italian, but not a translator by formation. And but work more and more with translators and sort of working on the process of editing translation, because sometimes, you know, it's not only a question of language, but it's also a question of culture and I mean, topics that I'm sure you guys know about well. Obviously, also apply to the news business. It's just the turnaround time here may be a little quicker, but ultimately, you know, our translated stories are the translation is really the key to it all. It's first finding the right stories, having the language skills and the interest to look for stories in the languages that people have, and then getting them into, in our case, into, you know, flowing and fluent English, and then you know, editing it in a way that really speaks to a global reader.
Can I go back a little to something before we
Sure.
talk about translation and challenges of translating news? Can I go back a little to what you've just said? Because
Sure.
I find it really interesting that while there were some websites or online magazines in different languages, there wasn't one in English. Do you have any idea why that was like that? Why there wasn't any English language news outlet, online news outlet? Because it's actually a great idea, and I think it's interesting to a lot of people to know what's going on in the world. So any idea why the situation was like that?
Yeah, well, there are some theories. Actually, there was a magazine back that my dad actually remembers in the 50s and the 60s that did something like this. And, you know, there's always been an element to obviously breaking down the language barriers in any foreign correspondence, and that's the starting point for any foreign correspondent, is to read the papers in the country you're covering. You're only one person. You can only get around so quickly. And so and there used to be a monthly magazine that did something similar that was very policy oriented. But as a general interest magazine or a news organization that did this in the last couple of decades, I think it surprised me as well that it didn't exist. I think probably an explanation is that there is a lot of coverage already in English around the world, that the American news organizations and the British news organizations have always had the resources to be able to have their own correspondents out covering the world, whereas let's say in Italy, where I first saw this magazine Internazionale, there weren't as many Italian foreign correspondents around the world, and so to get coverage and top-level coverage from around the world, this magazine was very useful. The Americans and the British thought that they didn't need it. Maybe you could say that they could go out and cover the world itself themselves. Now, for economic reasons, is the sort of the internet has disrupted the whole business model of news organizations, and foreign bureaus have been closing and budgets are cutting. And so that's one reason that more and more people do need it also in English. But even, I think, more pertinent is that it's great just to have different points of views and stories that come from all over, that are written by people that aren't necessarily, you know, when I was the American foreign correspondent writing about a foreign country for American readers back home, and I always started off with my point of view as an American living in Italy or in France. But it's actually interesting to know what the Italians are saying about Italy, but also about Europe and about America and about culture. And so, but yeah, no, it's surprising that it never existed. And you know, I'm glad we're giving it our best shot now. Yeah, but a lot of people asked me along the way when we were getting started, they said, "Are you sure nothing like this exists in English?" And I said, yeah. So yeah, so I was lucky enough to be in Italy and in France and see these magazines and how interesting they could be, and then so the opportunity presented itself to me. Yeah.
Great.
So, okay, so what are some of the specific challenges of translating news and journalism?
Well, yeah, I touched on them a bit before. I mean, I think, you know, first of all, you have to know which story, if it's first in the search for the right article. And, you know, the spotting the article and then translating it and editing it are all part of one process, you know. And I know that when I spot a story, and like I said before, my experience as a foreign correspondent, I would pick up you know, when I was first in Rome, let's say, would pick up the Italian papers, and I'd look and see what the Italians were writing about Italy. And I would spot a story, and I'd say, "Oh, that's an interesting topic," but I knew that I would have to go and report it differently and write it differently because my reading public didn't know Italy as well as Italian readers did. Mm-hmm. And so so for us now, when we're looking for stories to translate in whole, and we also do summaries and do our own pieces and bring stories together. But if you're actually looking for a story to translate more or less in full, that story needs to be comprehensible once it's translated to a reader. So you can't when you're translating or editing it, you can't spend your whole time explaining what the original reporter was referring to. So once you've found the story that more or less is accessible to a global reader, then in translating it, you have to still keep that question in mind as you're translating. And you say, you know, the French newspaper will, you know, if they're talking about the finance minister or the finance ministry, the French papers will refer to its location and they'll call it Bercy. Mm-hmm. And so when you're translating it, you'll do your editor a big favor if you don't call it Bercy, but you say the finance ministry. And now that goes all the way up to and including identifying who people are, and providing sometimes some context if you see as you're doing the translation, your knowledge of both the subject that's being covered and your reader. You have to put those together, and then of course make it sing, as we say, right? You've got to then it's a language question and making things comprehensible, but then also a great read. And so, yeah, I see in working with translators that there's the first part that in some sense, my former job as a foreign correspondent is sort of broken up into segments in the process that we do. We're spotting the story, and then making the bridge, the cultural and information bridges, and then making it a good read. All those elements are essential also in the process of translating stories. Translating news stories.
That probably means that the role of the editor is very essential to your outlet, right?
Yeah, we do. It depends on the article. I mean, one good example or one way to think about it is, we have some great papers, let's say here in France, that we work with. We work with Le Monde and Le Figaro, and they've got great foreign correspondents as well. And so we sometimes translate their stories from, Tunisia or from China or where have you. And in those cases, the job of the editor in terms of, and the translator as well, in terms of making those bridges is there's less work to do there. That story, because the French reader needs to know as much about China as the reader who's going to read it in English. But in figuring out which story to do about France from the French papers, the editor has to really push whoever's suggesting the story. If I happen to read French, but if it was from Poland, I would have to ask our contributor and say, well, is this story, does it give enough background? Will you be able, will this connect with an outside reader? And they say, yeah, more or less, and then they'll send it in. And then there may be, in any case, some heavy lifting to do by the editor when the piece comes in English to maybe, fill in those gaps that maybe the translator didn't realize that the reader in Chicago wouldn't know. And so, the editor sometimes has to add in that context and make it all comprehensible and read smoothly.
I'm very curious about how you choose the partners you work with. And the reason I'm asking is that when I was browsing your website, Worldcrunch, while preparing for our interview, the only Russian newspaper I saw was Kommersant. And it actually belongs to, I'm not sure, probably you're working with some other newspapers as well, but Kommersant belongs to, or was it Ведомости? I'm not sure at the moment. Anyway, it belongs to a Russian oligarch that's associated with a big corruption scandal at the moment, which is going on at the moment. So the point of view expressed in the paper, it might be one-sided. It might be expressing the one side of the story. So where are you getting the other side of the story? Are there any other partners that you're working with? And how do you pick the partners you're actually working with?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The short answer is we work with the partners who we're able to get partnerships with. So we're a relatively small operation, so we don't have the budget to go spend a month in Moscow meeting with the newspapers there and making the contacts, and then and even once you make the contact, you then have to convince them that this partnership is interesting. So Kommersant, in that case, we had a connection, a guy in London who knew a top executive at Kommersant, and that's how we got that. That's how we got that partnership. But we are well aware that it would be one-sided no matter what if you have just one partner, right? And so, but we're conscious of that, and so we will pick and choose also in the stories that we would greenlight. China is an even better example, but everywhere there's sort of varying levels, up to and including France. If you were to talk to a French person and you were to say Le Figaro, they would say, Le Figaro, and they would tell you why that's one-sided. And so it's an issue everywhere that we're aware of. We want to more and more, because it is complicated to get these partnerships. And so what we're trying to do more and more now is actually ask our contributors also to write short summaries of articles, so that we don't need to necessarily get the authorization from the newspaper. It's just sort of summarizing stuff like news organizations do all the time, just from a different language. And so we're doing that more and more. And so in that case, it ends up being up to our contributors then, our journalists and our translators who want to pitch stories to us from different places. And Elena, after we get off this call, I'll encourage you to send me some pitches of interesting We'd love to get them, where we'd love to get different points of view. We also get different points of view, like I said before, from the foreign correspondents writing about different places. So we have stories from Russia, from our French partner, from our German partners, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not, we're not in a position to sit there and say, oh, we can have any partnership we want and we pick this one or that one. You know, I come from a background, you know, the American press, for better, for worse, warts and all, as they say, more or less the way I was taught to do journalism was that you're looking to tell stories and you're looking to explain things rather than necessarily promoting some agenda or putting forward some political point of view. And so that's in general, that's kind of the approach I have in the totality of what we do. We have holes both geographically and politically, just by the nature of the limited amount of resources that we have. But yeah, we spent a good part of our energy in the first 3 years trying to get these partnerships. We would go to these journalism conferences here in Europe and try to meet with editors and publishers and newspaper executives. And so we would just be opportunistic about who we could meet. You know, we'd like to get top newspapers that have a lot of resources, and then ideally that also, you know, have varied points of view and have a similar approach to journalism. But we know that journalism is done in different ways in different countries and the limits of it. And so, but yeah, that's why we want more and more to do to sort of what they call aggregation, you know, to pull stuff in from different sources, and, you know, more and more turning to contributors and people who may even just want to share what they're reading and saying, oh, I read an interesting, you know, if you read an interesting article, Elena, you know, but you don't have time to write it up, you know, you could just share it and say, hey, this is a cool article about, you know, the you know, tech in Moscow, just FYI, and then we could look at it. And one thing we do as an editor who doesn't speak Russian is if you were to send me a link, the first thing I would do is actually click on that link and put it through Google Translate. And that would help me sort of determine, you know, not definitively, and Google Translate, as you guys know well, is insufficient on any number of levels, but it sometimes can help someone like me to determine if that article should then be assigned to a human. You know, I can sense whether the article, the length of it, whether it's actually quoting people, how it's organized, and the general sort of approach. And you know, with your recommendation that it's worthwhile, we can then make a determination as whether to assign that to someone. And so yeah, so we do also use Google Translate as editors in the selection of stories, but not in the production of them.
Another question I have is, I'm sorry, Dmitry, for interrupting you. It's just such a great topic. Another question I have is whether you collaborate only with old media or with the new media as well, because in some countries, and Russia is a great example of it at the moment, so traditional journalism might not be as unbiased as we'd like it to be. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people, journalists who work in the new media and who are making reports and posting stories and filming some reports as well. So do you consider stories made by professional journalists but who are not part of the old media, of the traditional media?
Absolutely. I mean, the way, you know, we launched was going to some of the more traditional news organizations, sort of to give ourselves the standing to begin to build our company. But we're looking more and more actually to connect directly with the writers themselves, no matter where they're published, and spot stories no matter where they are, and to contact the journalists themselves, because there's the question of getting the authorization. We won't translate a story in full and publish it unless we have the authorization either from the news organization or from the writer. And so more and more what we're doing in this sort of second phase of building sort of expanding the variety of sources and points of view is to find ways to connect directly with the writer, no matter where they're writing. And you know, we translate stories from that are digital only, from digital only publications, even from a blog, a personal blog, if we think it's worthwhile. We don't set any sort of artificial barriers. You know, we thought it was important to begin with some of the top newspapers that have the resources, so that then when we're selecting stories, there are lots of stories, you know, to choose from. But we're looking, still a challenge for us to look to create the mechanisms to have our readers and to have anyone who's out there interested in contributing to spot stories, and then we figure out how to get the okay from the original author, and then to get it translated. So yeah, we're doing more and more stories like that.
I was wondering, does your readership or subscribers, do they have any influence on what kind of stories you're gonna pick up, or maybe they have a specific interest in a specific kind of stories, or maybe in specific regions or countries of the world?
Well, we do get suggestions from readers on particular stories. Yeah, as I said, we actually want to do more and more of that, where you know, not to put forth any kind of agenda, but just because if we can multiply the number of eyes and ears out there spotting things, the more variety we'll have. And so you know, we've done a couple of reader surveys in the past, asking them what sorts of stories they were interested in, and you know, the world is, as we all know, is a messy place with a lot of conflict and politics to follow. But you know, we also don't want to do only that, and we want to be able to tell stories, maybe small stories in some out of the way place in a country. And to cover all different topics in terms of culture and society and technology. And so we from the beginning, we've been a sort of general interest media, and we'll continue to do that. But you know, it means we have readers who come in who find us for all different kinds of reasons. But I think most of the people are our core readership likes the variety of points of view and geography, and being able to read stories from all over.
And I guess this is where the Worldcrunch IQ comes into play, right? So you have developed a platform that allows people to contribute stories by offering their help to translate stories from their countries. And this platform is called Worldcrunch IQ. Can you please tell us a little bit more about this platform?
Sure. This is a project, you know, we were thinking in the early days when we were figuring out how we were going to do this. You know, we're a startup, we're a relatively small operation, and so we had to once we established that we were going to going to work directly with some key news organizations on their stories. We had to figure out how we were then going to translate them. And we decided in the early days that probably the simplest, most efficient way would be to work with a small group of freelancers. A couple, we have a small editorial staff here in Paris, and but to work with professionals who we develop a relationship with by, you don't necessarily never get to meet them in person, but at least you start to have a Skype with them, and you ask them to send in their samples of their work, and you explain to them what you're doing. And each time it would take, a certain amount of our time to test them out and get them up and running. And but that was more efficient than actually just opening it up and saying anyone who wants to volunteer, anyone who wants to chip in. We just thought that was the best way to start small and ensure high quality, which was essential to us. And but we've always had in the back of our minds that we should open it up, and we should really encourage, as we've just been talking about, encourage anyone out there who wants to contribute in any way, and create a space for them to introduce themselves, to sort of create a profile, to sort of to come on board as a contributor in some way, to share what they're reading, write stories, translate stories, suggest stories, and share stories. And so we got a small grant to help us build a platform. So the sort of the technical side of it, to allow us to start to invite people, the general public, both translators, but also journalists. And we always say that we work with journalists who have good language skills, and we work with translators who are interested in news and journalism. And more and more, we're also getting in touch with people who are sort of experts in their field, who may be writing in a different language, and those pieces can be translated as well. And so we're trying to connect, create a kind of a virtuous intersection of translation, journalism, and expertise, and allowing anyone out there who's interested to sign up and create a profile. It's very easy to create their own profile. They can create have a space on Worldcrunch to interact with us and to display their work, and hopefully over time to figure out good ways
we can work together. Are there any
specific
requirements the contributors should meet before signing up?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the sort of the process of filtering through who's able and interested to actually contribute in one form or another happens in the process of doing it. But if someone, like I said before, if someone wanted to just share the articles that they're reading in a different language, saying this ought to be in English, a global reader ought to read the story just because it's a great story, or just because it's interesting, or maybe because it's something I agree with, or what have you, and they just want to share what they're reading, and let someone else do the translation or the crunching, as we say, the sort of the summarizing of stories into briefs and into different kinds of articles. If someone just wants to share what they're reading, that's fine too. And so it goes from that all the way up to someone who becomes a regular paid contributor with Worldcrunch. And so this platform is a way for people to get introduced to what we're doing and in some way participate.
Do you work only with native language speakers, or I guess for some languages it wouldn't be possible? So sometimes people translate from their native language into English as well, right?
Yes. In fact, we work with people also who are translating into a language that is not necessarily their first language. And in fact, this may be a way for people to, if someone is I'll stick with Polish. If someone is an English to Polish translator, but their English is very good, and they want to build up their skills translating Polish into English, we're happy to work with them, because we know there are always two stages of editing after the translation or the news summary comes into us. So we make sure that the language gets polished up and it's made perfect through the editing. And so we work with people who translate in both directions. We also do some translation, particularly here in Paris. We do some translation because we have other clients as well, which is a different part of our business. But always doing editorial content, sometimes for third-party clients, and so some of them are looking for content in French. And other languages, so we do end up having work going into other languages as well. So IQ is also a way to expand this network of translators into all languages potentially.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Every single piece of news that is submitted by members of your community is going through editorial process, right?
Exactly. It goes through the editorial process, both of whether there's really a story there that's worth telling and worth our efforts in terms of translating it and editing it. But then once it gets the green light, and once it comes in, if someone just wants to submit something, they can just submit something. And if we think it's good, we'll give a thorough senior edit to it, and then we'll also have a proofreading that comes after it. So they're always we're rigorous about the editing as well.
That's a very sound approach, and I think this is the way it should be. I was wondering, what kind of benefits do translators have if they want to join your platform?
Well, it depends on what they're looking for. I mean, it's some people may want to create a profile to display their work and to interact with other translators. Others are looking to contribute in a volunteer way. And others are looking for paid work, and all of those are part of what Worldcrunch IQ is. We have a system that we're still working out some of the details of it. But if someone starts off as a volunteer contributor, and they provide they publish stories. We also, by the way, we always credit all of our translators on all work. So you have actually published material on our website with your byline on it every time, and we share it on our networks. And then people also we offer free subscriptions. Our website is a semi-paid website where after 8 articles, you hit a paywall, and if you contribute, you get a free subscription to Worldcrunch. And if we see that you're good, very quickly there are opportunities for paid work. As I said, we it's in our DNA to pay the people we work with. We always have. And we always will, and so it's a question of people, getting in touch with us and showing us what they're interested in doing, and showing us what they can do, and then we can begin to work together for paid assignments as well. Like I said, we have we have other assignments that come in for third-party clients as well. So there's some paid work that might not end up on Worldcrunch's website, but we get called upon to do separate assignments that require translation.
It's also the kind of work like people do for Worldcrunch, right? Also something connected with the news. I just know that people listening to us, our colleagues, are pretty much interested in what kind of paid assignments might there be. So could you give us an example, please?
Well, I mean, for starters, the basic work we do, we'll use Russian in this example. We've gone through a spell where we had two contributors translating stories from Russian into English, and who were no longer available. And so right now we happen to be looking for a Russian to English contributor. And so if you would do stories, there would be, in this case, we're actually looking right now for a Russian to English translator who gets paid by the piece. We call on them to suggest stories, and there's some effort that goes in on both sides in terms of beginning to try to figure out which stories are the right stories to do. And so we ask for the contributors to suggest stories, and then we go ahead and we give them the green light. And so there's paid assignments for our website. And then there are paid assignments, like I said, for clients. We, are asked to translate all kinds of editorial content, written content. We have corporate clients, and we work with organizations as well. Those come in depending on what the needs are of any specific client. So those can be any number of different kinds of things. But all the clients arrive to us because of Worldcrunch, the website. So they know what we're specialized in. So they tend to be interested in translation of editorial.
We have a thought of making this translation work one of the core elements of your platform. For example, promoting that you do a lot of translation work and promoting this to potential clients and helping connect translators with organizations and corporations who might be interested in translated content for their businesses.
We thought about the different ways to approach this platform, Worldcrunch IQ, and nothing is fixed in stone. But the way we're launching it is, in any case, to have the editorial hub still exists. So not to just be a marketplace. We know some of those exist out there, and what sets us apart is that we do the filtering in terms of the quality of the finding the original content that is interesting for the client, and then making sure that the translator can do a good job on it, and then with the layers of editing on top of it. So in order that the end client has polished, publishable product. That's what we offer to clients. Is the editorial know-how, not just the network of translators. And so, but yeah, I mean, if it evolves that way, the clients are the platform helps us to communicate with clients so that they know the breadth of our network and the quality of the network of translators and journalists. But for the time being, at least, we're still part of the process. The editorial team is part of the process.
Are there any other benefits? Well, one I can think of is the fact that your translators work with editors. And so I think it's a great way, especially for someone, it's probably wouldn't be that valuable for someone translating into their mother tongue because, well, translators are great writers, but for someone working into their non-native language, it would be a great experience and a great learning experience working with editors and perfecting their English language skills.
Absolutely. No, we do you know, take the editing process very seriously, and you know, we hope that the translator on the one hand is able to see how we've edited their copy, and it can help them improve, and also then the published material, which has their byline on it, is perfect, as in perfect English, and I think just more generally for someone who maybe, you know, we work with translators who maybe, you know, their well-paid assignments are in a specialized field, but they happen to be really interested in news and journalism and storytelling, and so this is a way, as a sort of side activity, to be part of the news process and telling stories from around the world, and so, you know, we think we've had good luck up until now working with a core group of translators and journalists, and you know, when we do have paid assignments, it's not at top market rates for specialized translation, you know, except for in some cases for certain third-party clients, but most of the sort of journalism, it's not quite as well paid as more specialized translation, but because the business of news is not a very lucrative business at the moment, and so, but it's good enough, and we make sure to pay the people who are working for us on a regular basis, and it's like you said, it's a learning experience, and it's a way to get your stuff out there to a wider audience.
Yeah, and it's a perfect way to build a portfolio, which is not that easy, especially when you're a translator and you're often bound by confidentiality and stuff like that. So you cannot talk about your projects, you cannot say what you're translating, you cannot publish or share pieces of your work online in many areas of translation. And when you're working in the news, on the other hand, it's a great way to actually showcase your skills and show the world that what you're capable of as a translator. So I think I guess it's a win-win relationship for all of us.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and also those of us who do some side projects know that once you start doing it, a lot of opportunities might open that you wouldn't have
interestingly enough,
before studying something. Yeah, so it's really
absolutely. Yeah, no, our articles, they get shared all around the world, and like I said, we're always very we're happy, and we like to show off our team of translators, and so your name is on, if you translate an article, your name is always there. And then now with the IQ platform, everyone who creates a profile for IQ, then they're not only is their name on the article, but there's a link to their page, to their personal profile page on IQ, which then has their portfolio of work, et cetera, et cetera. So it's building this.
Is there a way to contact translators from the IQ page?
Well, we can from our dashboard. We can contact people through the system if they're logged into the system. Otherwise, we have email alert systems in place, and we've got a Facebook group. So we're in touch with people in different ways. But for now, we want to. The platform isn't yet able to, where you're not yet able to send messages across via the platform to other members of the community. Although it's no secret, we're happy to put people in touch if they have a particular thing, a particular person they want to get in touch with. A lot of times on people's profile, they put contact information, and so it's all out there for the public. It's just that we haven't yet connected the pipes to make the platform interactive in that way.
Yeah, well, I guess it takes time to develop something like that because it's a complex project. And I know myself because I also have developed a community for translators where people can sign up for an account and they can interact with each other. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
We have a question from one of our viewers. Lola asks, are news translated only into English?
Well, that's the sort of, that's the lingua franca, that's the hub language. We actually, some of our stories are then syndicated out to other publications in other languages that are then translated from English into the third language. So some stories do eventually make it into other languages. And like I said, we work directly for clients who are seeking translations into other languages as well. On Worldcrunch, the website is just in English. But someday we could imagine expanding into different languages, always with the idea that you can bring everything into English and then go out from English into other languages. But for now, we're focused on getting it right in English and building the website out that way. But Worldcrunch IQ is a way to expand across different languages.
I hope we've answered your question, Lola. Do we have any? No. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Jeff, to what you have shared with us today?
Nothing comes to mind. I would love any feedback that anyone has on any of the things we talked about today. If anything wasn't clear, I'm sure I have a tendency to ramble on. If anything wasn't clear, just get in touch with us. We're at info@worldcrunch.com. But the first thing to do with anyone who's interested, I'll drop it in the chat here. I don't know if anyone's going to say it, is to, oops. Okay, no, I guess I already sent that message. Well, here is the link to IQ. Okay, there you go. So the first thing to do if anyone was interested in seeing ways to contribute is to just click on that link to Worldcrunch IQ and create a profile. It's pretty simple, and then be in touch and let us know if you have any questions. But yeah, no, I hope I answered or explain the basics, and we're still in the early days. We've just launched this a couple of months ago. The platform, Worldcrunch itself, has been around for almost 6 years, but the platform is hot off the presses, fresh off the presses, and so we'd love any feedback that you folks have. And
I guess awesome. It's a great time to join it, since
Absolutely.
It's yeah,
that's right. Exactly.
Be the trailblazer.
Exactly.
We'll include all the links in the show notes, and you also promised to send the link to the article you wrote about on a similar topic, and we'll include it as well. I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. It was very interesting. I hope you guys watching us enjoyed it as much as we did. And if you are watching the recording, please don't forget to check out our website at Translators On Air. .com and join our mailing list so you don't miss the next episodes. And also, don't forget to check out the website of our sponsors at smartcat.ai, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.